Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Hausdorff Reads the Bible. Today I'm reading Genesis 28. Now if you recall, last time Isaac was intending on giving a blessing to Esau, but Rebekah orchestrated this whole thing so that Jacob would steal it and then of course have to leave town. And the whole point of this was so that he would marry somebody from her hometown rather than a Canaanite woman because, I don't know, I guess Rebekah's a huge racist. So today we start with the first section, Jacob sent to Laban. And I guess Laban is where Rebekah is from, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, let's go ahead and dig right in. Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him. You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. Alright, so first of all, I find it interesting that Isaac has now called in Jacob and he blesses him. Last time, he was very upset because he was trying to give a blessing to Esau and it instead went to Jacob, and this was a horrible thing. But now he's blessing him again anyway. And the other thing, of course, about that story where he stole his brother's blessing was it seemed like these blessings were some kind of a commodity that, they were in short supply. But yet he has another one here. I'm not totally sure what to make of all of this, except that there's sort of an inconsistency here. I'm not really sure what these blessings are. I don't know what they mean. I don't know. But anyway, he blesses his son. Actually, found in Guzik, his interpretation of this, because he apparently noticed how ridiculous that kind of seems, he said that the idea here is that Isaac has now accepted the fact that God has chosen Jacob as sort of the favored one, the one that's going to pass on this covenant with God. If you recall from the past, God chose Jacob even though Esau was the older son, and typically Esau would have gotten the birthright and sort of passed everything on. God chose Jacob, and then everything kind of worked out that way. But Esau was Isaac's favorite, and I guess he didn't like that choice by God. But now he's finally come to terms with it, and that's why he has blessed Jacob. That was Guzik's interpretation. Seems like it's taken a few liberties, but give him credit, it kind of makes sense. So, as always, sort of judge it for yourself, but that seems like a reasonable enough interpretation. Because when I read it, I thought it was weird that Isaac was blessing him again, and I guess that kind of explains it. The other thing about this that Guzik pointed out that I just found absolutely fascinating, he says the following: Jacob is by no means worthy of this blessing. Each of the four parties in this whole birthright mess were in the flesh somewhere along the line, which I totally agree with, by the way. Continuing on, the amazing thing is that God could bring any good out of all of this, and this is an example of the triumph of God's sovereignty. What good is God actually bringing out of this? So there's all these people. There's, Jacob and Esau. There's Isaac and Rebekah. All of them act in a really crappy way at some point in these stories. And yet they're being rewarded. They're always being rewarded in these stories. God is always blessing them, giving them rewards, making them rich, making their crops grow, and so forth. And so the amazing thing is that God brings good out of this. What good is God bringing out of this? All he's doing is rewarding shitty people. But then he says this is an example of a triumph of God's sovereignty. Now what does that mean? This kind of reminds me of the whole moral argument thing. Something is good because God says it's good. Well, then no matter what he does is good, even if any reasonable person would look at it and say this is a super terrible thing to do. Obviously it's good because God did it, because he's sovereign. I don't know, this whole line of logic doesn't really work with me. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on. Oh, and also, I know when I read anything that talks about family lines and people's names and stuff, my eyes kind of glaze over. If you didn't notice it, Isaac has just instructed Jacob to go marry his cousin. I don't know what you want to do with that, but I certainly find it peculiar. Okay, moving forward. Verse 3. God, I'm 5 minutes in, I'm only on verse 3. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings and that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau's mother. So, okay, that was the blessing. I guess I jumped the gun a little bit on explaining what Guzik had said, but what are you going to do? Okay, moving forward. Next section is called Esau marries an Ishmaelite. I find the very idea of the term Ishmaelite amusing. Although I guess when people are from towns, they create a word for that town. Anyway, verse 6. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there. And that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women." And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Paddan Aram. So all this happened here is Esau has seen all this transpired with Jacob and his parents. Okay. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, whatever. So basically what happened here was Jacob was told not to marry a Canaanite woman, and he was sent away so that he would marry somebody else. Esau looks at this and he sees, oh, the Canaanite wives don't please my parents, and so he goes and marries one of Ishmael's, Ishmael's children. So, now again, this is also a cousin, sort of, not quite a cousin, because so from Esau's perspective, it's his father's half-brother's daughter. So, not really good with family connections here, but if it was his father's brother's daughter, it would be his cousin, but it's his father's half-brother's daughter. So I guess genetic material-wise, it's half as much as marrying a cousin. I don't know what that means. But again, not exactly sure what to make of that, but it's interesting. Now, what really struck me about this part of the story is I feel really bad for Esau, because he seems to be desperate for approval from his parents. He gets wind of the fact that his parents don't like a Canaanite wife. He has 2 of them. And apparently they don't care about multiple wives. Nobody gives a shit about that. But he sees that, so he goes and adds another woman. He gets another wife that they would hopefully approve of. So he's clearly just looking for approval here. I feel sorry for the guy. This is what happens when parents highly favor one child over another. Anyway, moving forward. And by the way, I don't know what the point of that story was, that part of the story. Maybe the whole point is that he now has 3 wives and that's bad, although nobody seemed to care about polygamy back then. I don't know. Maybe they'll come back later. We'll have to see. Okay, moving forward. Next section, Jacob's dream. Verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. Alright, so Jacob's traveling. At some point, it gets dark. He sleeps, and apparently he used a rock as a pillow. I don't know why that's such a significant thing, but they mention it several times. Okay, moving forward. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So basically, it's just the same promise that God has been making to everybody. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave until you have done what I have promised. For I will not leave you. But I thought God was everywhere. Anyway, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So now that little line there, so he has this dream, he sees God, he sees that God is in this place, he gets really excited, and he says, now once again the key line here is Jacob said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. That I found peculiar because his grandfather and father both have been hearing from God that this land is going to be given to their children or their ancestors or whatever. Surely Jacob has been hearing this his entire life. You're going to get all this land. It's, God is going to give it to us. So the very fact that he would say that he didn't think God was in the land, I found strange. But then Guzik kind of mentioned, well, I don't know how far he's traveled so far. Maybe in Jacob's mind, it was just in the land of Canaan, and now he's exited the land of Canaan, and he thought God would be gone, but now God's still there, and that's what surprised him. And reading it again, that seems like a reasonable interpretation, so that's what I'm going to go with. But he's realizing that God's scope is much wider than he had previously thought. Okay, moving on. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Why would he just be allowed to rename places? I guess if he's writing a book, he can rename it whatever he wants. Anyway, then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to keep... Let me just say that again. If God will go with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So a couple of things there. First of all, I find that tenth really interesting because when I was going to church growing up, it was very serious that you were supposed to give a tenth of your money to the church. And I wonder if this verse is the basis for that, or if perhaps this verse is one of many that's the basis for that. Anyway, but moving beyond that, I find this interesting, what he says to God, or, he makes this deal. He says, I'll work with you, God, as long as you give me food and clothing so that I can remain peaceful. So, basically, it seems like he's asking for a handout to me. He's saying, God, give me food and clothing, otherwise I'm not going to be able to be peaceful. I mean, is the implication that he's going to go out and kill people? It's kind of what it sounds like to me. It seems kind of screwed up. And actually, what I found really interesting here is that Guzik kind of agreed with that. And he said it won't be quite that easy for Jacob. And his idea was kind of that he's trying to make this deal with God and set these terms. You do this thing for me and I'll work with you. And Guzik was kind of like, well, God could have just told him to go screw himself, but he didn't. But things aren't going to be easy for him. And clearly it seems to me like he's referencing what's coming up in the next chapter, or maybe a couple of chapters down the line. Whatever's going to happen when he gets to his, uncle's house. Apparently it's not going to go good for him. Again, I haven't read ahead. That's what Guzik's commentary suggested, which I guess seems good because Jacob's kind of a dick, and so maybe he could use some tough love. We'll see where this goes, but that sounds interesting to me. All right, well, that's all for today's reading, and thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.